Hi everyone! Welcome to another edition of Ali's Book Reviews, and today I'm going to look at, arguably, one of my favorite plays of all time, Merchant of Venice, by Master William Shakespeare. Now we're going to look at the play from different perspectives, from its historical significance all the way to its cultural context, and we're going to end with its characterization, and namely the character of Portia, everyone's favorite, and how she was a reflection in many ways of Queen Elizabeth herself. Believe it or not, Queen Elizabeth had a very close relationship with Shakespeare, and that translated into many of the female characters that Shakespeare introduced in his stories. Portia was one of them. How a woman fights in a man's world, and how men continue to underestimate women and the power of women. And the theme of the story, which is the power of mercy over justice. How justice is so incomplete without the feminine essence of mercy. And how Portia was that character that brought this essence of mercy into the justice world of men. So, to kick things off, let's start with the beginning of the story and how the story opened. Now, as you recall, the story began when Bassanio approached his friend, the honest merchant of Venice, Antonio, and asked him for money because he wanted to go to the city of Belmont and marry the beautiful lady of Belmont, Portia. And so the honest merchant of Venice, Antonio, your classic Brutus of the story, I always see Antonio's character very close to Brutus' character. I think Shakespeare deliberately placed these very much idealistic characters into the story. And these honorable men were always placed into dishonorable situations, if you will. I think Shakespeare was very critical of this trait of personality, this mere arrogance to be idealistic. I personally think Shakespeare himself was very pragmatic, and in his stories he continuously criticizes characters that are idealistic, like Brutus, like Antonio, and places them in very awkward situations. I mean, look at Brutus, for example. He is this honorable man, this honorable senator that everyone believes in, everyone trusts, including Julius Caesar. But he is placed in this awkward situation where Julius Caesar is destroying democracy as we know it, much like Donald Trump now. And then you have the Brutus senator, like senators we have now in the Senate, in the awkward position that we have now, senators in the awkward position, of either saving democracy. He's your classic Paul Ryan character, if you will. They are honorable men that most people admire, but at the same time, their ideals keep justifying their unjustifiable actions. And when you look at Brutus' character, you can easily see that. He is faced with the awkward position of stopping Caesar, but at the same time, he doesn't know how he can proceed. If he wants to go through honorable means, the way Pompey did, and faced Caesar in battle, he will be crushed. He doesn't have a chance. And so he is well convinced by Cassius, Decius, that the only way that he can stop Caesar is to assassinate him in the Senate where he least suspects anyone would backstab him. And that's your textbook definition of treachery. Yet the honorable Brutus falls into that narrative, falls into that demise. And so I think Shakespeare was very critical of these form of characters that are very idealistic. And I think in many ways Shakespeare is speaking to us, and how sometimes we have these ideals that we fight for, but at the same time we don't know what they are. Antonio was a reflection of that. Even when he's faced with death, he's unable to find a course of action. He would say, I would die, but my ideals would not. And that's your classic Brutus, if you remember at the end of the story with Cassius, and how he chose honorable death in a form of suicide, rather than being killed in battle by Octavian and Mark Antony. And so your honest merchant of Venice, Antonio, is faced with the situation where his friend wants money, but he doesn't have the money at the moment. So he tells Bassanio, my ships are coming over from Africa. I think in a couple of weeks they'll be here. I don't have the money now, but you know what? I'll go and ask Shylock for the money. Now, Shylock is another interesting character in the story. He's one of the key characters. He's certainly a round character because we see one side of him that is pure evil. His grudge, his grinding grudge to destroy Antonio has blinded him, that he sees nothing but an opportunity to get to Antonio. But at the same time, we see him as a father to Jessica, and how that relationship doesn't turn out well, especially when Jessica leaves with his money and his gold. And we don't know how to feel at that moment, right? We have mixed feelings about Shylock. At one point, he's an antagonist. We hate him, we despise him. But at the same time, he's a victim that we cannot easily judge. Simply because his situation, his people are in a very difficult situation, a very difficult environment at the time. He's an ethnic minority that is being marginalized, being disenfranchised by the ruling elite. And so you don't know how to feel, whether to feel sorry for him, sympathize with him, or despise his actions. You certainly don't judge him so easily, and that's exactly what Shakespeare wants us, or how Shakespeare wants us to see Shylock, as a blend of antagonist and very much a victim in many ways. However, the story becomes very interesting when Shylock proposes a very sinister deal to Antonio and says, you know what, if I want to give you the money, I usually charge interest. You don't accept interest, you don't charge interest, nor do you take it. So what I can recommend is that you say you're going to pay me off in 30 days, and if you don't, then I want a pound of your flesh and blood. And that's when the story becomes very interesting. It is seen as, in the dramatic irony of the situation, the characters in the story see it as a very humorous situation, hysteria, but the audience or the reader sees this moment as a very significant point in the play, because this pound of flesh can only be interpreted as the heart of the person, literally the heart. And so nothing satisfies Shylock than seeing the beating of Antonio's heart in his palm. And that's what makes the story so interesting, because we are placed in the pause when Antonio gets the money, gives it to Bassanio. Bassanio goes over to Portia, faced with the 3 caskets, 1 gold, 1 silver, and 1 lead. And there's a elusive device in that lead that I will get to. And there are all these suitors coming over from Africa, from France, and they fail miserably. They choose the gold box, the silver box, but Portia's picture is in the lead box. Gold, as we all know, symbolizes what the materialistic man sees as value. And Shakespeare reminds us that all that glitters is not gold. Not everything that shines is valuable, meaning that not everything that we see as valuable is actually valuable. And so a lot of times we are attracted by things that are futile, that are fleeting. They're not everlasting. Same thing goes with the silver, in the sense that the silver was an illusion of pride and self-fulfillment, and how sometimes man falls in love, falls into the pit of his own ego, and that's what happened to the Prince of Paris. However, you might ask, why was Portia's picture placed in the lead box? Now, this is quite interesting. First of all, lead in literature is a symbol of slow death. All right. Well, that's not a very gleefully interpretation of love. So how would you explain that? Well, let me get into it.